Hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about memory tagging and other things. But the first thing is I was interested to see, it's bad news, of course, but it's interesting. We had a ransomware attack affected the National Health Service in London, and they now say they had to cancel over 800 operations. So this is the kind of, and I saw another article that said they estimate that something like 60 or 80 people have been killed by ransomware so far. They target medical institutions primarily because I think they found that they will pay the ransom. And their security tends to be pretty terrible because they're, of course, focusing on a different kind of security. Like I saw talks and they say, when we're making like a heart implant, our main concern is that the plastic won't irritate your body and it will continue to function to make sure you stay alive and it won't cause a blood clot or anything. And cybersecurity is just not on that list of our security considerations. We're thinking about medical security. And
Yeah.
so anyway, it's
Hmm.
an interesting number and the sort of thing that might help people understand the importance of the problem. Um, if you have to cancel 800 operations, even if those are supposedly not critical operations, I bet that causes some real harm, maybe even death of some people. So, uh,
Yeah, I would agree. There was first hospital I know was in Los Angeles about oh gosh, 12 years ago. And it's kind of funny that I think they wanted $4 million and the FBI got him down to a half million.
yeah,
So you'd think by now medical institutions would be more proactive about this, but
well,
they're not.
the fact is, there's not anything clear to do. I look up the latest advice,
Yeah.
and the advice is just the same old stuff. Use two-factor authentication, install antivirus, segment your network, and none of that is really going to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, if there was something you could buy that stopped it, then I think everybody would cheerfully buy it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, yeah.
Zscaler.
Yeah.
Zscaler might stop it, right? That's the idea. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But then, again, um, it's the authentication issue.
yeah.
But you're right. If you had certificates on computers, but there are always going to be exceptions. In the medical world, you have a doctor that's traveling, or you need to collaborate with another physician that's with another health facility outside your organization. But yeah, Zscaler would put a tremendous dent in that.
But then if your internet connection went down, nothing would work at all.
That is correct.
And it reminds
And
me of another medical issue they had years ago when it was all Windows XP. They were in an operation and the anesthesia's Windows XP rebooted to put on an update. And so the
yeah,
hospital freaked out and they turned off automatic updates everywhere. So 6 months later, they got wiped out by a virus because they didn't have the
yeah,
updates. And you just can't win for losing.
yeah, yeah.
It's the way every
We're
company is, right? You have other considerations and you make some kind of compromise to get the work done, and that creates some vulnerability.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep,
Yeah. Well, let's hear about
yeah.
your priest.
All right. So here's a priest from Pennsylvania that is allegedly, but I think it's pretty much accepted that he spent $40,000. Now, you'd immediately think it would be on porn, something like that, but no, it was on Candy Crush Mario Kart Tour.
I think that
And,
counts as effectively porn.
and he was using the church credit card.
I knew a guy that told me he finally had to cut his wife off because she kept spending so much money on Candy Crush.
Well, I've never played it. I don't know. How do you
I
spend
played it.
money?
Well,
Yeah,
because you're playing and you have like so many tokens or lives or something, and they go down, and you can either end your game and get a low score and have to start over, or you can pay to buy more lives or something. You
oh,
can buy
so
more power ups. So you can basically you all of them, you can play the game or you can pay to cheat.
so wait, you can play the game, but let's say there are 200 levels. You
Well,
get to level 150, you can pay
well,
for something like that.
no. I
No?
if you get to a level 150, even if you never pay, because I never pay, then you're still at
Yeah.
level 150. But if you're struggling with 151, you just can't get over, you just can't get over, you could pay to like get some extra boosts on that level.
I see. So it's kind of like bribing a magician to understand what the secret is to the trick.
Sure, or bribing the ref. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
basically you can cheat and you can pay to cheat, and that's a pretty good business model. And apparently, just like gambling sites, it's addictive. I would never pay because I say, look, the whole point of the game is you have to practice until you get better at
So,
it. If I pay, but once you start paying to move up a level, well, then you didn't practice enough, so you're almost you need to pay for the next level too. It's pretty obvious to me
yeah.
that this is a spiral, but apparently people go there and then they're paying a lot of money.
Huh. That's an interesting one. Well, this priest was addicted, and how he got started, we don't know.
Well, you remember there was
But
a guy in Congress like 8 years ago that they
yeah,
actually expelled from, I think, a state senate because he was playing Farmville during like the deliberations, and they warned him like several times, you got to stop playing video games. He wouldn't stop playing video games, so they kicked him out. I mean, I,
all
I guess
right.
they're addictive like any other activity for some people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I could see that. All right. Well, what do you got for us? That's my first story.
Yeah,
The priest who spent 40,000.
well, what I'm thinking is when we have augmented reality visual glasses, so you can watch something without other people around you seeing it, there's going to be a lot of people watching porn and playing video games when they're at work, driving their car, in boring
Yeah,
meetings.
yeah.
Anyway,
Hey,
um,
but Sam, how come somebody doesn't have a website and has Candy Crush cheats on it?
oh, there are websites that discuss strategy and everything. Um,
But you can't. But when somebody gets a cheat, they can't post it on one of those other websites.
no, the cheat is not in the form of a secret. The cheat will be something like a power up or another life or something.
Oh. So it's
Yeah,
like you get you can jump higher, or
right.
I get it. I
Something
get
like
it.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I get it. I get
Yeah,
it. I get
it's
it.
a brilliant way to make money, but
Yeah.
you could argue that it's kind of unethical. I mean, you're sort of exploiting the ones with a weakness. But of course, I remember you
Yeah.
could say the same thing for bars. I mean, how many people keep going to a bar and pay a lot of money for drinks all the time? It's also kind of an addiction, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, all right. What's your
Well,
next story?
I got what I think was the most important one this week, which is
Okay.
ARM. Remember Spectre and Meltdown on
Yes.
Intel processors because they have this speculative because I remember when I first heard about this teaching like CNET 100 20 years ago, I said, that's insane. You mean the processor is actually performing 20 instructions at the same time? That will never work, but that's how they work. It begins processing an instruction. It does the first bit of it, the next bit of it, the next bit of it, and then the next instruction is following on the pipeline. So by the time it finishes the first instruction, it has done partial processing on the next 20 instructions. That's pipelining, and all modern processors have it. And what that means is if the first instruction was if not logged in as administrator, skip the next instructions, it has already executed the next instructions before it finds out it should have skipped them. That's speculative execution. And then it
Okay.
has to roll it back, but the rollback process is not perfect. And it leaves traces in the cache of certain bits that have been loaded that wouldn't have been loaded if you actually didn't go on the wrong side of that if statement. And so that was used to make all those attacks on Intel processors. And now it happened to ARM. ARM has
Oh,
a feature.
really?
Yeah, ARM has a feature which I've been waiting for years. When I explain this to my students in my exploit development class, I say the problem is if I have a series of bytes, that could be text or music or executable code, and there's no way for the computer to tell. It doesn't know the difference. A series of bytes can be interpreted in many ways. And I said, in retrospect, it might have been better if we had like 10 bits per byte instead of 8, and the last two tell it what kind of data is stored here. And that's what this is. I was amazed to see this. This is a thing called memory tagging extensions that tag regions of memory with what kind of data is stored there. And I think it amounts
Okay.
to the similar thing in Windows. There's a virtual allocation function. You allocate a memory block and you specify permissions, read, write, and execute on it. And so they have it, and it's implemented and supported in Pixel 8 phones and in Linux. And it therefore detects memory safety violations just like the similar defense in Intel, processors will stop memory corruption attacks because you can mark a region of memory non-executable. However, it turns out that they can get past it with speculative execution. 95% of the time, within 4 seconds, they can detect the permissions for a block of memory, and apparently they can get around them. I didn't quite understand quite how they get around them. So that's pretty gruesome. And if it's like the other speculative execution flaws, it can't be fixed without replacing the hardware with new hardware that doesn't exist. But what they can
Yeah.
do is what they did for Spectre and Meltdown and the 6 or 8 that came after it, is put in like corrections in the firmware to try to dodge those instructions.
Hmm.
And so it's an issue. I don't think they have much of an answer here to say what the answer, how they're going to fix it. But ARM undermines it. It argues that it's they urge the implementation of mechanisms to prevent speculative oracles. So obviously they're going to try to implement microcode to dodge these instructions, and that's what all our computers are doing this now. All processors I know of are subject to this flaw, and they all have imperfect, weak defenses that every few months have to be upgraded again because somebody finds another way to work it around it. This the
Yeah.
it's the boat, just like the internet. We're riding this leaky boat, patching the holes as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, yeah, this is early on in ARM's development, so
yeah,
we'll see where this is going to go.
yeah.
Something that we're definitely going to have to follow.
I mean, the fundamental issue is that if you stop doing speculative execution, you would suffer a significant performance hit.
Performance
I
hit.
remember when
Yeah.
they put the mitigation in the cloud providers, they gave everybody double the RAM for free to compensate for the performance hit. So it was a large performance hit. And I remember every time I boot up VMware, it says, do you want to run with speculative mitigation because that'll slow down the machine or not?
Yeah. And
Anyway,
what answer are most people going to give?
well, I always say no because my virtual machines are there to be like targets of an attack anyway. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
have any personal information in a virtual machine or anything.
Yeah. 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 But people want the performance. It,
Evidently, they
it's
do.
always performance over security.
Well, for
Usually.
home
Usually.
users, yes, because home
Yeah.
users imagine, oh, what harm would it do if someone hacked me? But then when they lose their only
Bank
copy of their
account.
novels and
Yeah.
their wedding pictures and someone's in their credit card account, they say, oh,
Yeah.
now it occurs to me I should have considered security at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, I got one for you.
Yeah.
Remember a few years ago when Wells Fargo got busted, employees were opening bank or not bank account,
They
fake
were
accounts.
slamming
Well,
people with
well, yeah,
accounts.
let me yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, let me actually correct that. They were encouraging people to open up accounts. And if they didn't, and they'd notice that somebody didn't have another account, they automatically opened them up to the tune of 2 million accounts.
Because I think they could then their performance for
Yeah.
their boss. The boss would give them like a bonus for opening this many accounts this month or something.
Yeah, and it looks good, right? Wells Fargo is growing. We just have 2 million new customers, 2 million new accounts are opened
And
up.
all those guys have to pay fees, I think, right? So,
Yeah, some of them were if it went below a minimum balance. And what they were doing is they were transferring money out of somebody's maybe a checking account into a savings account or savings account to a checking account. And people are saying, wait a minute, where'd my money go? And they said, oh, you transferred it to this other account that you opened. And it's no, I didn't. Anyway, that was several years ago. So let's see. This was sentencing, I believe, was last year, and the head of the bank, meaning Wells Fargo's bank retail operations, was sentenced to 3 years of probation.
hmm,
Okay, the bank CEO, get a load of this, was banned from ever working in the banking industry for the rest of his life.
that's a lot like what happened to Trump in New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Wells Fargo is still in the news. So in 2020, as a result of that, Wells Fargo fired more than 100 employees who it said was personally defrauded. Oh, no, sorry, this is a different one. Again, Wells Fargo, separate instance. In 2020, Wells Fargo fired more than 100 employees to 100 to 125 who had said personally defrauded the pandemic relief program for Small Business Administration.
Oh, is that the one where you would get like money for your employees? Because I
Yep.
must get like emails from them, text
Yes.
messages still like every 2 days,
Yeah.
trying to get
Yeah.
me to sign up for that stuff, which I'm definitely not eligible for.
Yeah, and it was not an insignificant amount of money. So here we've got the 2 million fake accounts. Wells Fargo is in the news again. 125 employees were defrauding the pandemic relief fund. And then this Monday, this week, Wells Fargo fired more than a dozen employees for simulation of keyboard activity. And what it did is it created the impression they were active at work, that they were typing something or doing something. So you can buy these online for about $20. They're called mouse jigglers. And you put your mouse on it and it jiggles the mouse. And I'll tell you what the easy way to do that is. Get a clock with a second hand and put the mouse on top.
Oh yeah, it'll jiggle. That's true. And I think
So
there's software tools that do it too.
there's software, but the software tools are detectable.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, you don't want to have a piece of software loaded on your machine that really gives you away.
Well, the previous two involved actual theft of money, essentially. This
Yeah.
one, I really don't understand. I mean, you're going to pay your employee because the mouse is moving, but and apparently there was no work getting done, and you don't care about that. I mean, why?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that bothers me that you would get paid more by jiggling the mouse than by not jiggling the mouse. That seems like a really poor measure of whether you're actually working.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know what the role these employees had,
Yeah.
but as employers are monitoring performance and activity of employees, right? They're using software to monitor keyboard activity.
Well, that's right. And I think they ought to measure output. They ought to measure that you actually accomplish something, not that your keyboard is tapping and that counts as accomplishment. This is like teachers that grade on attendance. I show up, I go to sleep in the back, I get an A
Yeah.
because I'm attending.
Yeah. 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 So, by the way, California schools, we're bringing back No Child Gets Left Behind. It's a variation of it. And what we're trying to do is elevate the students who are at the bottom end of the class to make sure that they pass.
And how do you do that? By just elevating their grade artificially? I mean,
You get creative, yes. So, I have been reading how administrators at school, this is typically K through 12, are insisting that teachers give students credit for attendance,
yeah.
at least 50% or a passing grade if you show up in class. Doesn't mean you have to take any quizzes, exams, do any homework, but if you're there in the classroom, that's 50% of your grade.
Well, we had a partnership with Europe, and Europe was the program that would take people that are sort of like homeless and
Yeah,
headed for a life of crime, and they would take you to this training program, and you do it for like a year, and then you can get a job. And the
yeah,
idea, most of the program is like politeness and dress, just so you learn and a little bit of technical skill, but it's mostly, how to act like a professional person. And then you get a job like a receptionist or something. So it's not terrible. But we had some of those students that came to our college. And the thing is, they pay you to be there, and you're there for like all day getting trained. And every time you do anything wrong, they tell you you're doing it wrong and they cut your pay. And that's when you get fired, when your pay goes to zero. So they would come to City College and they would just sit in my class quietly and do absolutely nothing. No homework, no tests, no nothing. And then I'd ask them like halfway through, how are you doing? Everything's fine, because they thought all they have to do is be there. And if nobody's yelling at them, they're doing fine.
yeah,
And they didn't know that you were expected to like do something outside class and understand what you accomplished something. This is like the army. You show up, you do what you're told, they yell at you, and you're doing fine as long as nobody's yelling at you. That's
yeah,
another
yeah.
model. And I guess all you have to do at Wells Fargo is be there jiggling your mouse and you're fine.
Well, yeah, and to be clear, this is not only Wells Fargo. Other companies are using these metrics.
Well, yeah, and I have this. I mean, I think we talked about this at the last podcast. Irvin brought it up, and my feeling is
Yeah.
this is like teachers who actually go into Canvas and look for how many hours did they have Canvas logged in, and
Yeah.
evaluate
Yeah.
a student's
Yeah.
progress based on that. And it just seems to me to be a silly measure. You should measure an accomplishment of some kind. But
Yeah. All
anyway,
right. What else you got for us,
right.
Sam?
I've got Adobe. I was pretty interested in this. I've been seeing a lot of people getting mad at Adobe, mostly because Adobe had the terms of service to make it sound like they could take your data and use it to train AI. That's what people are mad about. But here, they have hidden cancellation fees. When you sign up to buy some Adobe product, they put cancellation fees on the web page in small type, concealed behind other graphic elements so you can't see them, and then tried to charge you those fees. And this reminds me of the dark patterns used by the Trump campaign and a lesser extent by the Democrats, where you would sign up to donate $5 and hidden on the page would be, this is $5 a month, where you wouldn't notice it. And then they'd take $5 a month out until you realized it and canceled it. And so obviously that's illegal in the second case. In the Trump case, I think it was not illegal because it was technically visible on the page, but they call it dark patterns. They made it sort of hard to see, so most people wouldn't
Yeah.
notice. But apparently
Yeah.
here they just made it invisible and then pretended you had agreed to this. So they're actually getting in trouble with the feds for that, which the FTC, my alma mater, rightly, this is what the FTC is for, when you deceive people into paying for something they didn't want.
Yeah, this reminds me, goes back many, many years. There was a woman out of Mill Valley, California. She and her husband turned out to be together the richest couple in the world, I believe exceeding Bill Gates's wealth.
Wow.
And what they ran was a 976 service, call a girl, call,
Oh, the
a
sex
sex
chat
line.
line.
Not, yeah, yeah. So they were busted by the FTC and they were ordered to send out refund checks. And at that time, the internet was kind of coming up and coming online. And so you got a $25 check that was part of a class action lawsuit. And if you signed it, in the fine print on the back, it says, you agree to join partypoker.com for $25 a month, billed to your credit card automatically.
Oh man.
So here you get a refund check, but they've already taken the money.
When I worked for FTC contracts,
Yeah.
all such language was in the court order and had to be approved by the judge. It said what you were going to say on the check, probably for this reason. Nothing went out without being approved by the court first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of course that's awful. And it might have been legal at the time, right? If they forgot to include that in the order, then
Or what's on the front of the check, or here's the refund letter, and maybe it was in the refund letter,
yeah.
maybe the font wasn't specified. I don't know.
Well,
I did not get one of those checks. Sorry.
no. I was the database analyst, and one time I made a mistake, and we paid four people like more money than they were supposed to get. And the
Yeah.
boss hauled me in and he said, "What letter did we send them?" And so I showed him the letter said, "Enclosed is your share of the settlement." And he said, "There's nothing there. They won the lottery." We can't say,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
send them a letter like that, we can't come by and say, "No, we sent you the wrong amount." If we had said, "Here's how much you should get," and then the check was for something different, we might have something here. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah. Anyway. All right. You got another story for us.
let's see. Yes, the last one just came up again. Now there's on the San Francisco Examiner has a big story saying Kaiser waited 5 months to disclose massive data leak. And this is the data leak I've discussed previously, which I think is complete garbage. The data leak is when you're using the page, clicking on stuff, it's sending cookies back to like Google, keeping track of what you're clicking on because it just has the same metrics that every website has to know what people are doing. And now they're deciding that's illegal for health companies. So it means every health company with a website in the world is breaking it because they just have an ordinary web page. They didn't get hacked. Nobody stole the database. Their website is not any different than every other website on the web. It just has the usual Google Analytics cookies and Facebook Analytics, that sort of stuff. And now they're deciding that counts as a breach. And if that's really a breach, then this is going to be every company that handles health data in the world because they're all doing this. And nobody thought this was
Yeah.
wrong. I didn't think this is wrong. I'm not sure I think it's wrong now. I mean, this really seems kind of outrageous to make such a big deal out of this, but it's all over the press. So I
I
guess people are going to have to redesign all the medical websites in America if these guys end up actually having to pay a fine or something.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, huh?
Yeah, technically, I guess they're right. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like making a mountain out of a molehill to me, though.
True,
Yeah.
true.
I mean,
All right, you got another story? I'm out
I don't.
for
Oh,
this
you don't want to
time.
talk about the disinformation one today? Maybe you took.
Which one?
You had
Which
one
one is
about
that?
disinformation and election disinformation in Spanish on your page, but maybe,
Oh,
yeah,
oh yeah, this is from Marketplace Tech.
yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about mis and disinformation. Now it's they're targeting Spanish speakers.
I'm just surprised they weren't doing that before. I know in the original, I think 2016, the book about how they manipulated the election, they specifically targeted black voters, and I would think
Yep.
specifically targeting Hispanic voters would also be a logical move. A group of people that you could probably send a crafted message to and sway them.
Well, now they're doing it. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, this is in a way why people criticize the Democrats. They say you people don't appeal to Hispanic voters. You treat them like they're all the same. And you really have to understand that the Cubans are very different than the people from El Salvador and the Mexicans. And you should be
Yeah,
sending different messages to each of them. So, but it
yeah,
is
yeah.
disinformation. So what is the disinformation though? Uh,
Oh, it's the typical stuff that fake Biden, fake Trump.
oh,
It's
okay.
all election related.
So,
AI generated AI voice.
oh, that
Or
sort of thing.
chat. Yeah, yeah. All that. What we've been saying for a while.
Yeah.
It's now going after, and I guess they feel there's a large enough voter block there that it's time to pursue them.
Oh, it's very, I've been hearing for
Yeah,
years that the Hispanic population is so large that they can decide elections very much. And
yeah,
also, I would think they'd be very much susceptible to disinformation if they don't speak English well.
yep,
Then they're not going to get most of the normal news. And you could probably more easily sway them, just like any other group, like the Chinese speakers and stuff. They're kind of out of the normal information system and probably
yep,
relying more on like the words of their friends and little fringe papers that are probably easier to manipulate and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. This election is going to be the one with the most mis and disinformation, I think, in the history of the United States.
Yeah, well, I'm listening to podcasts and quite a few people are saying that Biden is going to win easily, but this won't become apparent until October.
I don't know. I think the misinformation is on Trump's side.
Oh, yes, I think it is, but I don't
Yeah.
know how effective it'll be. I think
Okay.
I what people are saying, quite a few smart people I listen to, now, not that they're perfect by any means. I mean, predictions are difficult, especially about the future. But the they say that most the people who decide this election are the undecided voters, and those are people who do not pay attention to politics. They don't read the news.
Yeah.
They aren't even going to start thinking about this until the second half of October. And
Yep.
they say when they see Trump, what he's saying, they're going to just recoil from him and go to Biden, and Biden will win, and it won't even be close. So I hope that's true. Um, I There are some problems though. The prices went up from inflation, and people are just really mad about that, and they want the prices to go down. And there's no force on earth that can make them go down. So even though inflation has dropped to almost nothing, there was this burst of 20% inflation a couple of years ago, and um, that makes people mad at Biden. And the situation in Gaza makes people mad at Biden. And I doubt
Yeah.
he's going to be able to resolve that anytime soon. Every American has tried to resolve it with no success, and every American president. So, that might alienate enough of his base that he
Yeah.
would make it.
Yeah.
But realistically, how many people would really vote for Trump, even with all of Biden's flaws? I mean, if you do A/B testing, you got to choose one of these two. It's hard to imagine deciding to vote for Trump, but you could decide to just not vote because you're so disgusted. That's what
Yeah.
they're afraid of. Anyway,
Yeah. Anyway, that's it for me this time.
Yeah, it's it for me too. Okay, and we'll have another one of these on Friday,
Very
probably
good.
again later in the day than usual because I'm teaching a class.
Okay, that'll work.
All right.